Human trafficking is a global and national concern, and yes, it is also a problem right here in Greater Cincinnati. Hello, I'm Kathy Laren. On this edition of Focus, a conversation about efforts to end slavery right here, right now. In 2012, the Salvation Army partnered with End Slavery Cincinnati to expand the resources and services available locally to address and combat human trafficking in our community. How big is the problem locally? Who's at risk? And how are the slavery rings broken up? Our guest today to explore the topic, Erin Meyer, Anti-Human Trafficking Program Coordinator at the Salvation Army and Coalition Manager of End Slavery Cincinnati. And Luke Blocher, Director of National Strategic Initiatives, National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. Thank you both so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
What exactly is human trafficking? How do you define it?
Well, it can most simply be described as modern day slavery. We think of historical slavery, individuals who weren't able to leave a type of work, they were being forced to work, they were being exploited. It's the same type of concept when we're talking about what slavery looks like today. Some of it looks even more close to what the historic slavery looked like than other types. For example, we still have domestic servitude here in Cincinnati, where individuals are forced to work in homes, cooking, cleaning, taking care of kids, and are not able to leave, and are not being paid for their services. We also have trafficking such as sex trafficking here in Cincinnati, whether that's massage parlors, brothels, or pimp control prostitution, escort services you can find online. It's a problem that's here, and we see it in a variety of different forms. Generally, it's the exploitation of men, women, and children for either labor or commercial sex.
I think many people would be surprised to know that it's going on right here at home. You think of that as happening somewhere, someplace else, some other time. What is the impact of this on our community? How big of a problem is it locally?
It impacts everyone, whether or not we want to see it or are able to see it. It does impact us all. And in terms of the prevalence, there really aren't a lot of studies out there, but we do know that we're increasingly seeing reports of it. We're increasingly getting hotline calls to our 24-hour hotline reporting the issue. That is mainly because there's just a broader awareness of what's happening, not necessarily that all of a sudden we've got this great influx of what human trafficking, of our prevalence of human trafficking here in the Greater Cincinnati area. But it's something we see everywhere. It's at night in pimp control prostitution, but it's online on Craigslist and on Backpage escort ads. It's in restaurants, in hotels, either through commercial sexual exploitation in hotels or the hotel staff that are working there who are being forced to work there and are not being paid and are not being able to leave or otherwise being controlled. It can be seen, again, like I said, domestic servitude in our factories, on our farms. Just because we think of Cincinnati as a city even, doesn't mean that we're not seeing trafficking in Butler County or in Warren County or out in the more rural areas in the Greater Cincinnati area. We see it across the globe, we see it across the U.S., we see it across the Greater Cincinnati area region, just in different forms depending on the community. But it's in many industries.
I think that one of the points that Erin made is really critical, which is that we have our exhibit at the Freedom Center. It's called Invisible Slavery today, because the reality is that our sort of sense of the numbers hasn't caught up to the reality of the situation because the awareness is so low, relatively speaking. And the reason that Erin is fielding so many more hotline calls and the reason there's so much more reporting happening isn't, I feel pretty confident believing that it's not because this just started, that people are just starting to figure out you can control people and exploit them and have to pay them. It's that we are just figuring out how to see it. And I say that we in sort of the general public. And the way the balance really starts to tip in this issue is when people every day are sort of have this top of mind. So when they see people in a situation in a restaurant, if something looks fishy, or they see someone in a massage parlor or something like that and something doesn't seem right, they don't seem to be in control of themselves. Instead of just remarking that seems weird and walking away, you say, I'm going to call this into this hotline. And that's how all of a sudden there starts to be consequences to doing this. For so long, this has been a really incredibly profitable and safe crime because there was so little awareness that it was happening. You could just do it and get away with it. And the tide is starting to turn there, but it's a lot of more work to be done with raising the general public's level of awareness of what this looks like and what you should do when you have some suspicions about it. And that's a big part of what we are all both involved in, but also lots of people around the country are involved in.
I was going to say, tell me a little bit more about your relationship with the Salvation Army in working towards banishing human trafficking.
Well, I'll just say from the Freedom Center perspective, and we have a very close partnership with Erin, with End Slavery Cincinnati and the Salvation Army around this idea of public awareness. We've partnered throughout this entire calendar year to have a monthly series every third Thursday at the Freedom Center at 6 p.m. We have an event which is meant to raise public awareness around this. There'll be a film showing or a lecturer or a panel discussion covering the different variety of forms this takes that Erin mentioned, talking about what it looks like here in Cincinnati, but also talking about how it looks around the world. Through that process, we're really trying to make this bubble to the surface of people's awareness of what's happening in this community, so that it's something that isn't, like you mentioned, Kathy, simply some concept that exists overseas or as some sort of academic interest. It's a real challenge that we've got to confront here.
Who's most at risk?
I would say a trafficker can be anyone and a trafficking victim can be anyone. Kind of pulling off what Luke was saying with educating the community. The more you know about who is at risk, who could be a trafficker, how you can identify it, how you can avoid it, avoid being victimized, the more you can report those crimes, the more you can prevent it in our community as a whole. We, in addition to our training events every third Thursday, we also offer free trainings to the community. Any community group can apply online on our website and sign their group up for an informational session or a training or a presentation or request a speaker, so that they can bring the education of human trafficking to their group, to their community, so that they know what are the signs and what to report. And again, that helps expand preventing who might be at risk. So most studies that investigate what sex trafficking looks like and who's at risk when we talk about sex trafficking. Runaway and homeless youth are probably the biggest when we're talking about sex trafficking. The average age of entry into prostitution in the United States is 13. That means that the average individual who is being exploited through commercial sex started when they were in middle school. And as a 13-year-old, you're not making that decision on your own. Life situation, individuals in your environment are influencing you to be making that decision or are forcing you into that situation. And so when we're talking about who's at risk, runaway and homeless youth, individuals who feel that they don't have other resources, there aren't people who they can reach out to for help, or that their families have abandoned, or they don't feel that those individuals are a support service for them anymore, or support group. They're at risk when someone comes along and says, hey, I can love you, you can be a part of my family, we can make money together, we can do what you want to do. 2 weeks from then, if you really love me, you'd go dance for me. If you really love me, you'd have sex with this friend of mine for money. And it goes on and on as that exploitation builds and those individuals get forced into the life, and then their life becomes a very different story day by day on the streets and pimp control prostitution. But also foreign nationals when we're talking about labor trafficking or sex trafficking. Anybody who is vulnerable in any way, which, let's face it, we all are. So traffickers are really just out there preying on individuals' vulnerabilities. When we're talking about labor trafficking, the chronically unemployed, which in this economy is a larger number than maybe at other points in our history. Someone maybe offers you a job, seems a little bit risky, but you're willing to take that risk because you need that money to support your family. And then you continue to get exploited even further and you find yourself in a labor trafficking situation. It can be anyone, and traffickers know that and prey on each individual's vulnerabilities.
Yeah, Kathy, I think Erin really summarized the key point, which is that the fundamental profile of a successful human trafficker is someone who can see vulnerability and then prey on it and figure out how to exploit it, whether that is someone who has emotional vulnerability or whether it's someone who has financial resource vulnerability, or someone in the instance of a foreign national who has sort of real legal vulnerability. They figure out what that person's vulnerability is, and they figure out how to exploit it so that they control that person for their own profit. And that's unfortunately a timeless story of human history. I mean, that kind of activity, that kind of motivation has expanded, has been going on since we've been around. Now, that's a pretty depressing fact, but there's an inspirational good fact aside to that, which is there have been people who we like to call abolitionists who've been fighting this that entire time. And we can feel, what we're doing today, what someone who sort of takes a stand and says, I'm not going to let slavery exist in my community anymore, that's a really heroic thing to do on its own, but it's also truly following in heroic, historic footsteps. You really are doing the same type of thing that the Frederick Douglasses of the world were doing. You really are doing the same type of thing that Harriet Tubmans of the world were doing. And I think that's certainly an important message that we try to share as much as we can, because people should feel proud of what they're doing if they're standing up for this. They should feel empowered. And I think even, maybe most importantly, survivors should feel empowered to know that not only are they sort of taking control of their own life, but when they take control of their own life, they're helping other people take control of their own life, just like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman did. I mean, those were survivors of slavery who then went on and changed the entire country's perception of that issue. And that's the same kind of thing, that I believe people who sort of take a stand today are doing, people who are, particularly who are survivors, who say, I'm not satisfied taking back control of my own life, which is an incredible achievement and shows incredible courage. But beyond that, they say, I want to go out and help other people escape the situation. And there are thousands of those people around the country who are leading organizations, who are, we interact with them in our event series from time to time. People who say, not only am I out, but I'm going to help other people get out, and I'm going to help other people be saved. And so those are really heroic stories that I think should get lifted up even more in the public's conscience.
When you talk about these stories of people, going on for days, weeks, months, we're talking years. Like how long in some cases?
It really does depend on the situation. I know, we've heard cases where individuals were being exploited for 10, 15 years in the sex trade by the same or sometimes different traffickers. That actual age-old selling of victims can happen in pimp patrol prostitution, particularly one pimp sells a victim to another pimp. And so in sex trafficking alone, it can be 10 to 15 years, but labor trafficking, it's the same. Particularly, again, if we're talking about a domestic servitude situation, when I used to work on the national hotline, we got a lot of different calls, particularly related to domestic servitude. And many of those situations, the victims had been being exploited for, again, 10 to 15 years. And some of that was because they were exploited in their home country first and then brought over legally, under legal work visas, to work in the home, but then were even further exploited here in the United States, not able to talk to anyone, not able to get clothes. There was one situation where it was a seasonal climate where it would be winter or summer, and one of the methods of controls the trafficker used was to not allow that worker, that domestic servant, to get any new clothes for the whole time she was there. I believe she was there for about 7 or 8 years. And so she didn't have a winter coat. She didn't have lighter summer clothing. She had just what she came in on, and that was all.
Do they understand they're being, in some cases, maybe they don't even understand that they're being forced into servitude? Do they know?
Again, when we're talking about some of the different vulnerability factors, we'd mentioned some, Luke and I, but cultural acceptance of practice is also one. When we're talking about domestic servitude, in many cultures around the world, class diversity is still very well accepted. And, but in general, even outside of that, many victims, again, don't feel like they're being victimized, or feel that they're being victimized but don't feel that there are other options or other people that can help. When we were talking about vulnerabilities in labor trafficking with foreign nationals, many don't speak English when they're in this country, so maybe don't feel like there's anybody they can reach out to. Law enforcement isn't maybe a trustworthy entity in their home country, so they don't feel that they can connect with the police here. And so feel that this is just the way their life is going to be because there's not going to be anybody who can help them out. Same on sex trafficking. We talked about youth or individuals who feel that society have disregarded them. So why would they think that when they're going to reach out for help, somebody's going to treat them with the respect that they deserve and offer them the support that they need to get out of the situation? In many cases, that's not what happens.
Who are the traffickers? Are they members generally from our community? Are they people from out there?
Everybody, members from our community. A lot of people, just like they think that trafficking happens outside of the U.S.
Yes, out there somewhere.
Many folks think that it's only gangs or organized crime. And I mean, gang members and organized crime are businesses, so they're going to go and have human trafficking as well as drug trafficking and arms trafficking and other businesses that industries they work in. But it's not just the gang members. Many of the situations that I've seen, particularly with labor trafficking, domestic servitude, restaurants and hotels, it's mom and pop shops, individuals who family-owned business, and they're exploiting their staff. Either they recruited from their home country, so it felt like a safe place to work, and then again, they're bringing people into a situation where they don't know the language, they don't know if there's anybody they can trust, and they feel like they should be trusted. Maybe this is the only place, this is the way it works in the US. And when we're talking about pimp control prostitution and sex trafficking, we have a vision of what a pimp is, but anybody can be a trafficker. We see all races, all genders, well, both genders, all different diverse groups who are exploiting others either in sex trafficking and labor trafficking.
I know the Polaris Project recently came out with a report that ranked Ohio and Kentucky in the top 32 states when it comes to proactively going after the people who abuse others, like the human traffickers. What is new when it comes to new legislation in Ohio that better protects the victims?
Well, HB 130 is a new House bill that is actually up for vote. So for folks who want to take action and contact their senator, it passed the House and it's now up for vote in the Senate. What it would do in terms of new legislation is expand on what the legislation is that already exists and make it more up to kind of the federal par. So advancing opportunities for victim services and advancing prosecution for Johns or purchasers of commercial sex. It's called the End Demand Act. And many of the provisions are geared towards making it easier for law enforcement to arrest, prosecute, and have higher penalties for those that purchase commercial sex from particularly minors or those with developmental disabilities. But it also expands the law to just kind of overall support victims and victims' rights.
You know, it's an important fact to mention, Kathy, that the kind of that legislative activity that Erin's describing is still relatively new. It was only 2008, when you think about this, that the first law against human trafficking specifically was passed in Ohio. That's correct, right? And so up until that time, to actually really correctly prosecute this, you had to sort of cobble together some other things that approximated what was being done. And that first law was only really just a starting point, and it really said we need to study this. So it was only 5 years ago. And so we're really still taking, I don't know if it's fair to just call them baby steps, but really at the beginning of what has to be a longer process for this. And I think the biggest step that still is yet to come is the real commitment of resources to specifically law enforcement activity against this. And I think right now the reality is this issue has a lot more attention in the popular culture. It has a lot more attention in the political culture. There are laws being passed. There are major commitments being made at a sort of a high level, but those aren't necessarily filtering down to the activity of a police department, a sheriff's office, federal investigators. It's not being the priority that I would argue it deserves for the scale of the problem. And I think the next step that has to happen for this really to be meaningfully addressed in our state and around the country is to really devote significantly more resources to the actual investigation and prosecution and arrest of traffickers. Because until that happens, you're sort of, you know, I wouldn't say you're whistling into the wind, but you're really hamstringing the folks like Erin and other folks who are really in the trenches trying to do something about this. And I think there's a big step that has to happen. So we should be very happy and proud of how far we've come, but I think we need to be very unsatisfied in the bigger picture about where we are.
You mentioned that a lot of people feel trapped in this life. The ones that do get out, share with us a success story.
There are many, and there's many successes on the daily. So clients that we interact with who get their first job, or who have their first apartment for their own, or get custody back of their children who were taken away from them while they were being trafficked. So many of those daily successes in people's individual lives. One of the more broadly publicized success stories that is affiliated with End Slavery Cincinnati is the story of the D'Souza's family, which is a family from India who came here and were exploited. They were trafficked in a restaurant. Both the husband and the wife, and to some degree their children as well, both were educated in India, had the equivalents of master's degrees or college degrees, bachelor's degrees, and were forced to work in a restaurant and being exploited, long hours, no breaks, not being paid, and being threatened. In that particular story, more information about that can be found on our website, but since they left their situation, they were able to obtain visas so they could stay in this country. They have obtained jobs, they've got their own place, their children are going to school and have received several honors and awards from their success in school, and they've just really been enjoying their life here in the United States and have been doing really well.
Share with us some signs that something might be going on. Somebody might be a victim of human trafficking, such as in the sex industry. What are some warning signs?
There are a lot out there, and actually many of them are very similar for both labor and sex trafficking. So the biggest one for the bystander who doesn't have the opportunity to interact with that victim is, does that person appear to be under the control of someone else? So, and you think that seems like a, kind of a no-brainer indicator, but it can sometimes be hard to see, but if you look for it, you can find it. So in the sex trafficking industry, particularly pimp control prostitution, many purchasers of commercial sex want to purchase commercial sex under the facade that they have money, they want sex, these women have a body and want money. So it's this simple exchange. They don't want to see somebody controlling them. And so pimps usually kind of stay in the background or will walk behind, not actually interacting directly with the victim oftentimes. But you can see it if you look for it. You see someone kind of hovering around, maybe shouting at people around them, or just generally very observant as to what is going on. In a labor trafficking situation we see frequently in Ohio, the traveling sales crews, kids or young adults who are selling magazines, subscriptions, candy, whatever it might be, door to door. Not every traveling sales crew is a trafficking network, but there can be a lot of vulnerability for exploitation in those networks, and we do see trafficking in those networks. Many times on both the local and the national hotline, we received calls from people who their door was knocked on and someone offered to sell them a magazine, but they asked simple questions. Are you thirsty? Are you hungry? How long have you been working today? Who are you working for? If they don't know who they're working for, what the money goes to, they said they haven't eaten today, they're hot, they don't know where they're sleeping tonight, they don't know what town they're in, all of those suggest that somebody else is pulling the strings there. Somebody else is making those decisions for them. And so that could be an indicator that there could be exploitation going on. Again, those are just broad indicators. There are some that are more in depth that you can get from asking questions, getting a better understanding. Do they have control of their documents? Are they getting paid? Are they able to leave their work situation or their relationship if they want to? Do they feel like they can? Those are all indicators you might be able to get by asking questions, but even just observing, you can usually get a general sense that something, as Luke was mentioning before, something fishy is going on, and it's worth reporting. Even if you don't know, it's always worth reporting because the hotline operators who answer can talk you through, ask those questions, get the information they need. And if it's a situation where you may interact with that individual again, maybe help guide you in other information to look for or other questions to ask, if it's safe to do so, obviously.
And that's just a really important point I want to underscore is the hotline exists not just for someone to call and say, I'm absolutely certain I saw this thing and there's no question about it, it's human trafficking. It's for people to call with something they see as suspicious. And the great thing about it is it's collecting calls from all over the country and all over our region, and you can then see trends and see if you get a bunch of calls about a certain location, then that's a reason to investigate further. So I think it's an important message to the broader public to think of that in the broadest sense of what I should bother to report, which is anything.
Erin, your best advice to somebody who might be watching this program who might be a victim?
Call the hotline. We're available 24 hours a day. Find a way to call. And we can connect that person with resources. We provide crisis interventions, so we can come pick folks up in a safe environment, or connect with others to make sure it's a safe situation. help get shelter, food, clothes, counseling, respond to the variety of the different needs that that individual might have, and help work with them to create a case management plan for recovery. And so that person can be living an independent life the way they want to be. So anybody who is exploited, or you think you're in contact with someone who might be exploited, call the hotline. We're getting, when we first started in May 2012, we were getting an average of 10, 15 calls a month. Now we're getting closer to 60 and 70 in just a year's span. So you can imagine, that goes to the prevalence or the greater understanding and greater awareness of what's going on, but it's just more and more, and the more you call, the more we can connect people with the resources they need.
Moving forward, are you pleased with what you're seeing so far? Are you pleased with the response overall from the community, from our legislators?
Definitely. As Luke said, there's definitely room for growth, but it has been, as Luke also said, there's definitely a opportunity for everyone to engage and for everyone to be working to combat this issue. And we're seeing that from high school students, from judges and attorneys. Anyone has the opportunity to get involved just by getting educated, reporting, educating their community. The more people know about it, the more we can report it. It's not just Luke and I who are working on this issue. There's so many others out in the community who are engaging with us, engaging with our coalition to connect so that we can have a broad community response, including law enforcement. There is a lot to go when it comes to law enforcement, but we have a lot of officers who are very dedicated to the issue and are investigating more and more every day.
Erin, Luke, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
It's not something that's happening out there. It's happening right here at home.
Yes.
For more information about End Slavery Cincinnati, visit their website at endslaverycincinnati.org. If you would like to report a human trafficking situation, connect with referrals, or are in need of crisis intervention, please dial the Greater Cincinnati Human Trafficking Hotline at 513-800-1863. For more information about the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, please visit their website at freedomcenter.org. You may also call them at 877-648-4838. Finally, to watch this and other Focus episodes again on demand, you can do so at our website, cettconnect.org/focus. Thank you for watching. I'm Kathy Lair, and we'll see you next time right here on Focus.
Tell us what you think about the programs we air, or let us know if you would like to see a particular topic on Focus. There are several ways you can contact us. You can send your comments by email to focus@cettconnect.org. You can call us at 513-345-6522. Or you can write to us at Focus, care of Andrew Dahman, 1223 Central Parkway, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45214. Any use or rebroadcast of this copyrighted program or portions thereof is prohibited without the expressed written approval of CET.